What's up YouTube, I'm Mike, and today I'm finally bringing you the next video in the Bob Does Steroids video, series of videos. This is going to be Bob's upcoming or his fall bulking cycle that he's already started. I've been trying to get this content out for days because Bob ran into some problems at the start of this cycle, and so this video stands to be relatively long, so look in the description for timestamps so that you can, skip ahead to the parts that you care about. I'm going to err on the side of getting too much information rather than too little, because we're going to have blood results, we're going to have pre-cycle, we're going to have all kinds of data here for you today. So if you enjoy seeing what happens to the body when you take anabolic steroids, this is the video for you. So for starters, let's remind you of Bob's last blast. Bob blasted on 550 milligrams of Test E, 800 milligrams of Test E, 550 milligrams of Tren, and he had used Anavar and Masteron at different points in that cycle. So Bob was running a relatively high level of total androgens for about 16 weeks with compounds coming and going. I made another video about that titled "What Can You Expect from Some Kind of Tren Cycle?" I'll try to put that video up here if you haven't seen it. That will give you the starting point for that cycle. Then Bob went into an off period where he was cruising on 200 milligrams of Test E and 100 milligrams of NPP. I believe I've made some other videos about that as well. Again, Bob does not like the Nandrolone compound, and so he employed a little bit of Proviron toward the end of his cruise, trying to get rid of some of the Nandrolone type effects. Bob had been experiencing some gyno throughout the last bulk and into his cruise that he was thinking might be related to prolactin levels. Bob obviously should have started this entire process with getting his blood work done, but he didn't. So what he decided to do was act like a moron and throw a bunch of different drugs at scenarios trying to solve problems. So he was haphazardly dosing his AI, Arimidex, and then he started thinking maybe there was some prolactin issues. So going into the new cycle, he added a couple of ancillaries. One was telmisartan at 40 milligrams a week because Bob has been struggling with his blood pressure. And the second ancillary is cabergoline, which he was planning on running alongside the Tren in the upcoming bulk. He went ahead and purchased the caber and decided to take a couple of doses of it to see how it would sit with his system before he really needed it, and also to see if it would have an effect on his lingering swollen nipples, his lingering gyno. So before Bob even finished his cruise, he popped a caber. He took 50 milligrams for the first week and then 25 milligrams for the second week, and his gyno symptoms did begin to improve but not completely dissipate, so he began to be afraid that maybe he had permanently affected the glandular tissue in his nipples. So that leads us up to this point, which is the actual cycle that Bob was planning to run originally. What he was expecting to do on this bulk was sort of a less is more bulk. He was talking to one of his buddies at the gym about his previous cycle, and they were like, "Man, I really think you're running too much gear. Why don't you try something lesser in like the range of maybe 400 Test, 400 Tren?" So what Bob settled on was 500 milligrams of Test E, 400 milligrams of Tren E, and he decided to try Tbol for the first time at 30 milligrams a day. Obviously not a very high dose of Tbol, but really just so he could experiment with the compound. Bob likes trying different things to see how they will react with his body and how his physique will react to them. So that was the plan. So the starting point for Bob in this cycle was about 196 pounds in the morning. He had finally peaked for the first time in his life ever at 200 pounds in the evening. I'll put up this image here, which shows Bob's starting point roughly at the end of his cruise. As you can see, Bob's getting a little fat around the midsection. He's still got good vascularity and some relative detail in the upper body, but that midsection area is what starts going to shit for Bob when he starts bulking. Bob had been eating in a steady surplus during his cruise of about 3,700 calories per day. Protein was up in the 200 to 220 gram range. Carbs and fats just up, whatever it takes to get to that 3,700 calories per day mark. Bob gained some steady weight in his cruise of about 6 pounds, but I suspect the majority of it was water weight and fat around the midsection. Bob's almost completely lost his abs in that picture. Again, this is as big as Bob tends to get. He's been slightly heavier than this before, but really at this point when his abs start to disappear, kind of freaks out a little bit and doesn't like that look. So this is going to be an awkward bulk for Bob because Bob is going to continue bulking even though he's not looking terribly good in the midsection. But he suspects that the trend is going to, even though he's eating in a deficit, in a surplus, might have some recomping effects and maybe tighten up the midsection. But really what he's trying to do is to see how high he can push his body weight with a goal of about 210 pounds in the evening, a solid 200 pounds in the morning as the goal for this cycle. So that's where we stand at the beginning point. Bob started this process again about a couple of weeks ago. He front-loaded his test a little bit to get the serum concentration levels up and then added in the Tbol, and he added it at 10 milligrams a day, twice a day for the first week. Because I've never made a video about Tbol, let me just tell you that Bob's experience with Tbol out the gate was phenomenal. He was really, really loving the way this compound felt. He felt like he was just happy and energetic all day. There was just a general feel-good feeling to the Tbol. The Tbol came on very rapidly for him. He could feel it working in his body in the first 35, 45 minutes. And there was a level of intensity that came with it. Not terribly different than Tbol, but kind of toned down and sort of a cleaner feeling, which is not surprising because it is effectively a modified form of Tbol. So this is how Bob started this cycle with basically running the test at 400 milligrams a week after a little bit of a front load, and then 20 milligrams a day of the Tbol. At like the 4-day mark, I can't remember exactly, Bob woke up one morning, he took his Tbol, he had a little bit of light breakfast, and then 30 minutes later he started feeling horrific and had a vomiting spell. He vomited once, kind of felt better, then again, and was scared that he wasn't going to get it under control. He took an antiemetic called Zofran, which stopped the vomiting, and then he spent the rest of that day in bed really not eating. He wasn't able to get any good calories down until probably 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was kind of a wrap on that day, and he basically just spent that day in bed and laying around. Continued to take the Tbol, however, that evening once he got the calories back in his system around 4 o'clock. And so around 10 or 11 that night, he took his second dose of Tbol, had no problems. Woke up the next day, had his breakfast, had his Tbol, 30, 45 minutes later, boom, again, a bout of vomiting. This time it was a singular bout of vomiting. As soon as he got the contents of his stomach up, he started feeling better relatively quickly. He was able to start eating again relatively quickly. Went on with his day, went to the gym, had a decent workout, and went on with life. The following morning, wakes up again, has his breakfast, has his Tbol, boom, vomiting again in the morning. What the fuck? This behavior was very similar to an experience that I had when I had very high estrogen at the end of, I think it was my testosterone cycle. I can't remember. I made a video about it called High Estrogen Turned Me Into a Pregnant Woman. You can check that out there. At least that's what I thought was causing the vomiting. The vomiting was like morning sickness. Again, it would only be after breakfast or even just an energy drink in the morning. It'd be like a singular bout of vomiting, and then everything was fine throughout the remainder of the day. So this is effectively exactly what Bob was experiencing. But just to be safe, he stopped the Tbol and then planned to get his blood work done, which of course he should have done before this cycle so that he would know exactly where his body was after a lengthy bulk and then what was kind of a bullshit cruise. And then, you know, where does that leave him at? So Bob obviously kept injecting the testosterone, but when he pulled the Tbol out, he had a couple of thoughts as to what could be causing the vomiting. He's researching vigorously what is going on. Could it be high estrogen? Bob feared that maybe he had some kind of liver damage, that maybe his system had not recovered from the previous cycle, and when he added back in a 17-alpha alkylated oral, that maybe it was taxing his liver, and that was causing the generally toxic feeling that he sort of had, and the morning sickness. And so he's looking up liver problems, and nausea in the morning is one symptom. He's looking up, could it be his prolactin levels? Like I said, he'd been struggling with gyno. He had added the CABR in. What if the CABR was causing the problem? So he's doing research on low prolactin levels, and that can be a cause of morning sickness. So you've got potentially high estrogen, potentially low prolactin, potentially damaged liver. This is sort of the paranoid storm of ideas that are going on inside of Bob's brain as he's wondering what the fuck is going on in my body that is causing this strange amount of puking. So what he does is he panics and he says, man, I bet I crushed my prolactin with that CABR. There was no reason to have been taking it. There was no evidence that I had high prolactin. Some research says that low prolactin levels can lead to morning sickness. So in an effort to raise his prolactin levels, he just jumps on Trenbolone. He was planning on doing the Tren anyway, so when he yanked the Tbol, he pinned 50 milligrams of Tren-E one day and then 50 milligrams of Tren-E the next day. Really in just like kind of a freak out. Bob's trying to figure out what's going on with his body. He's concerned that the long half-life of the cabergoline is going to lead to ever decreasing levels of prolactin, and he just freaks out and he thinks maybe I can plug in some Tren and get the prolactin levels back in range. So that's what he does, and then he goes out and he gets his blood work pulled, full panel, comprehensive metabolic panel, the whole nine, to see where is he at. So that was a week ago, and Bob's been waiting, as well as I have, for the data to come back in so that we could figure out what is going on so that Bob can set the stage for the rest of the cycle going forward. And today I have that data for you. So we're going to go through the blood work real briefly and then talk about the events that have unfolded since the blood work came in, and then get to the final details as to what Bob is going to be doing for the remainder of this bulk. So let me get the blood work up and we'll go over that together. Okay, the first piece of data we're going to go over is the comprehensive metabolic panel. This first section of the panel, I'm really just showing you for consistency's sake to show you the entire bit of blood work. Obviously there's only one thing here out of range, and that is the creatinine, which is not really of any consequence to Bob, primarily because it's elevated by 0.01. And this level can be up for any number of reasons, weight training being one of them. Bob at this point was working out 2 hours a day on average, 5 to 6 days a week, and so it's not surprising that the creatinine level would be slightly elevated. The EGFR is in, the EGFR, everything else is in range, so Bob's not terribly concerned about any of these things. Obviously a cystatin C, as Derek talks about, would be a better marker of kidney function, but at this point Bob's not really worried about any of the things on this panel particularly. This second panel here was of great interest to Bob because, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that he was very concerned about was that he may have damaged his liver. The problem is when you get a bout of vomiting and you start researching, hey, could damaged liver cause it? Yes. Could prolactin cause it? Yes. Could estrogen cause it? Yes. Could it be cold outside and cause it? Yes. Could you smile too much? Yeah, I mean, every fucking thing causes vomiting. So when you freak out because you're sick and you don't feel good and you start trying to guess what could be causing the problems, basically just about anything you can think of to say, could this be the cause of the vomiting? Yes, they just throw it in with just about everything. So you can really drive yourself crazy trying to point the fingers at all of these different things it's best to just get the data. Unfortunately, it took fucking forever to get the data back. So as you see, Bob's AST and ALT levels are perfectly in the range. One of the remarkable things about this piece of data is this is the lowest Bob's AST and ALT levels have ever been in life. He went back and looked at all of his blood work, and I believe this is the lowest ever. So it's really a good indicator of how remarkable a human body is. Bob's been blasting hormones for a period of 3 consecutive years at this point, multiple cycles with oral compounds for durations as long as 6 weeks, Tbol, Anavar, now Tbol, Proviron. Bob's thrown a number of liver toxic things in his body, several Tren cycles that some people think are hepatotoxic, and for his body to have recovered to what is apparently the best state it's ever been in is pretty remarkable. So Bob was feeling very good about the AST-ALT levels being back in range, and we'll get to this in a minute, but he used this as reason enough to go back onto the Tbol. But again, we'll touch on that when we get through the rest of the blood work. So AST-ALT levels are good, Bob's liver is looking fine. Now here you have the complete blood count. The only reason I'm even showing you this data, everything is perfectly in range, is just to show that hemoglobin is getting on the high end of normal, at 16.5, with the top end of the range at 17.1, so Bob is definitely be going and getting a little double red blood cell donation going. Bob coincidentally is very red and flushed in the face and upper body, just like me, and that seems to improve from getting that hemoglobin level knocked down. So Bob's a little bit overdue for a red blood cell donation, and that's going to be coming up shortly. Here we have the lipid panel. As it would turn out, the one thing Bob was that was not even on Bob's radar or something to be concerned about was his lipids. And as you can see, the lipids are not looking good. In hindsight, this is not surprising, given the fact that Bob was on a very high level of compounds in his previous blast that I mentioned that hammered his lipids. At one point, his total cholesterol was as high as 280 total. And then he goes into this bullshit cruise where he has nandrolone and proviron in the mix at 50 milligrams a day. And so his lipids never really recovered from the previous blasting and cruising. For a lot of people who are very, very health conscious, this would be a reason alone to stop everything right now and continue, go on a true cruise or clean out completely and try to get the lipid levels back into line. Bob is not going to be doing that. He is going to absolutely ignore these numbers, even knowing that he's got Tren and a reasonable amount of tests coming up in his next cycle, and he's going to go balls to the wall and just blast anyway. Primarily because, as I mentioned in the Leo's longevity video is not for me, Bob and I are just not terribly concerned with longevity. That coupled with the fact that Bob had perfectly good enzyme levels basically his entire life. I just noticed that plug, that switch is in my video. I really don't like that. Nevertheless, Bob's levels have been really good the majority of his life, and he kind of feels like if he has a few years with suboptimal cholesterol levels that it's probably not going to be the end of the world. Maybe he's wrong, and this is gonna lead to plaque developments. And Bob's wife is going to be making a video on this channel when Bob's untimely demise comes along. I don't know, but there's the levels. Obviously, HDL's in the toilet, LDL is quite elevated, and Bob's going to throw caution to the wind and blast again. Anyway. Next on the list we have prolactin. As you can see, prolactin is at the low end of normal. Normal range being 2 to 18. I can't really read from here. Again, this is indicative that the prolactin could possibly have been a factor. So he was taking the Caber. His last dose of Caber preceded the vomiting by about 2 days, 1 day, and fuck, my camera's gonna overheat. Preceded the vomiting for about 1 day. And then the vomiting started, so it's possible that, given the fact that he didn't get his blood work done until a week out, that the prolactin level was actually below normal when the vomiting started. Obviously, we'll never know, but as you can see, prolactin at the low end of normal. Next on the list, we have his E2 panel. This is a E2 test, an LCMS sensitive test. And as you can see, Bob is flagging high, unfortunately, at 73 picograms per milliliter, which is about 2.5 times the upper end of normal. So again, I don't know. Bob started vomiting. The last time I had a vomiting spell very similar to this, my estrogen was quite elevated. Bob starts a vomiting spell. His estrogen is elevated, his prolactin is in the range, his liver enzymes are in the range, and so Bob is thinking estrogen is the cause, jump back on the Tbol, proceed as normal, up the Arimidex dose, let's knock the E2 back into line, and everything will be good. That's what he was thinking. The final test here before my camera dies and we have to take a break is the testosterone LCMS sensitive test. As you can see, Bob is flagging quite high at 3,306, which is almost exactly 3 times the top end of the reference range of 1,100, with his free T at 1,118, close to 10 times the top of the reference range. So Bob's got a healthy dose of testosterone going. Again, this is with serum concentration levels approaching 400 milligrams of test E per week. So I suspect that this level is going to continue to rise over the cycle, possibly going as high as 5,000 on the total. We'll have more blood work coming up in the weeks or months to follow to track where that is at. So I'm going to let my camera cool off real quick, and then I'm going to come back with the rest of the details as to what Bob's experience has been since he got this blood work done. Okay, so once Bob got the blood work back, as I was saying, and saw that his AST and ALT levels were totally normal, he's thinking that it must be the estrogen, like I mentioned earlier in the previous video. And so as of yesterday, he started the Tbol again at 30 milligrams this time, 30 milligrams in the morning, 30 milligrams in the evening. Yesterday went off without a hitch. Bob was feeling perfectly good on the Tbol, morning and night dose, and then first thing this morning, bang, the vomiting was back again. He vomited one time, finally got his stomach settled, and then went on with the rest of the day as if nothing had happened. So I think it's pretty conclusive, although I cannot for the life of me understand why, that apparently the Tbol is causing the vomiting. Obviously, yeah, I don't know, like it's the strangest thing. He's not experiencing any other negative side effects. Not eating a completely full meal in the morning, that's the only thing I could even consider. But it's just a weird deal. You know, he takes the Tbol with food. He doesn't experience any kind of burning sensation or upset stomach or anything right away. And then it's really like 45 minutes later and he just starts feeling funny, and then boom, the vomiting comes back. So I think Bob is just going to shut down the Tbol. It's not really worth it. He was only using it to try to kickstart the cycle anyway. And he's already got the Tren in the mix, almost a week and a half into the Tren. So I think what Bob is going to do from this point out is try again to stick to that less is more idea, continue running the test at 500 milligrams a week, and then possibly taper up his Tren dose as necessary if he doesn't start to see some you know, the body composition changes that he's looking for. So he's going to be keeping his calories high, minimum 3,700 calories a day, and then tracking his weight, strength, and all of those things as he goes along. So because this has been sort of a volatile cycle, and because this is the first time that I've been able to start making videos in the beginning of the process, I'm going to try, like I said earlier, to do these in more of a cycle log fashion and keep bringing you the updates as they unfold. If there's enough data to do it once a week, or if you guys are interested enough to see once a week, then I'll try to do once a week, you know, kind of check-in videos if nothing else. Otherwise, maybe every couple of weeks we'll check back in with Bob's progress, look at some progress pictures, and see where his strength is at and where his body composition is at. So there you have it. Kind of a convoluted situation. Certainly not something that Bob was expecting from, you know, what's really sort of a benign, or you know, what he understood to be a benign oral. A lot of people in the comments are saying, when is Bob going to do Anadrol? If this ends up being the Tbol, then Bob is probably never going to do orals again. It's just causing too much problems. His liver enzymes do elevate pretty significantly anyway, and even though they're coming back to normal, his goal really is to just get bigger and put on mass. He's not competing, and so I really don't think at this point the orals are worth the risks involved. So maybe in the future, Bob will start using fast-acting esters or more front-loading to try to get the cycles going, or just, accept the fact that it's going to take a few weeks to get going and maybe start running longer, 20-week plus cycles. So we'll just see how it goes, and we'll see what the interest in this video looks like, and maybe I'll make another one next week. So hopefully you found this informative. As always, I'm always interested to see your critiques, your comments, your questions in the comment section below. And we'll see you on the next one.